Hi, welcome to Sunlight on Suffield. We're glad to have you on our show today. For people watching, this is our guest, Scott StLaurent from Enfield. He is a U.S. Army veteran, also a proud husband, father of four, and grandfather of six. You looked way too young for that, by the way. You were born and raised in Enfield, a U.S. Army veteran who served in active duty from 2004 to 2006. You're an accomplished IT professional with a master's degree in computer science, multiple certifications in Microsoft Azure, and a successful career spanning more than 25 years. And you also, if that weren't enough, you also host a weekly Twitch stream, which you'll have to tell me what Twitch is, highlighting retro video games and technology, as well as promoting mental health awareness. So welcome, Scott. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
And first of all, thank you for your service to our country. It's a large sacrifice that many people, sometimes everyone appreciates it, but sometimes I think people don't fully appreciate the sacrifice that veterans have made in their service. So to start things off, would you like to tell me a little bit about your military background?
Sure. Happy to do so. So I enlisted in the spring of 2004, in April 2004. The wars in Iraq and Afghanistan were going on. I had been laid off about 6 months prior, and I felt I wanted to serve my country, so I decided to enlist and got into that. Did my basic training in Fort Benning, Georgia. And then in June of 2004, I moved on to my AIT, the advanced training in Fort Gordon, Georgia. During my time there, I competed for and I won the Company Soldier of the Month, the Battalion Soldier of the Month, and the Brigade Soldier of the Quarter. These are all competitions where they check you to see how well you set up your uniform, how much knowledge you know, and everything else. So I did compete in those, and from getting those competitions, I was able to win a Army Achievement Award medal for that.
Very impressive.
Thank you. Thank you. At the end of the year, in 2005, I shipped off to Fort Polk, Louisiana. And from there, I started going into my actual job in the Army, which was radio ComSec repairer, which just means I was responsible for repairing radios and other equipment for the battalion. I was part of the 94th BSB, 4th Brigade, and there was a new brigade for 10th Mountain Division. And while I was there, Hurricane Katrina had actually hit Louisiana. It hit New Orleans later in that year, and I volunteered to be a part of the task force, JTF Katrina, to go there and help out the folks there in New Orleans. So I was there for a couple weeks to help out, distribute supplies, things like that. Towards the end of the year, I also received another Army Achievement Medal for the exercise that we did for our internal battalion and stuff. So that was another nice little thing to get. In 2006, I received my honorable discharge for medical reasons and transitioned back over to civilian life, came back to Enfield. Wow,
that's quite a distinguished career in the military. Wow, that's amazing. And how was that Katrina experience? That must have been difficult. Were you right in the heart of the recovery of all that?
Yes, yes. So it was quite a trip to get there, just because everything was kind of wiped out. And I'll never forget when you go into there and we first saw all the destruction that had taken place. We were stationed in an old aircraft hangar, and they had a whole bunch. We had the 82nd Airborne there. We had a number of other units that grouped up with us, and we were all taking turns distributing, MREs, food, water, and everything for the folks. I remember seeing Air Force One fly in with President Bush at the time. I remember also one of the most poignant memories from that was as we left, we could actually see where the water had receded from the flood line. You could actually see on the houses, you could see just the type of line that they left you see just how high the water had risen.
Yeah. So. That was incredible. On a side note, I was also in Katrina. I went there. I do animal welfare work, and I was there responding to getting some of the animals out. And I remember that stuck with me too. The water line, you'd enter a house to get, people would leave notes saying, I left my dog behind. Please go get the dog. And so we were going through organizations, but helping get animals back to their owners. And the water lines were like almost to the ceiling of these houses, and all the furniture was disheveled because the water would pick up and reorient all the furniture, drop it down, ruin everything. And it was a massive disaster. And I remember seeing the Army there. They're doing great work keeping people safe. There were mercenaries there as well, protecting private, the more affluent neighborhoods. But that was a little scary at times. But thank you for going there, because you had the frontline work doing that, helping people, and thank you. And that did prompt a lot of, by the way, that prompted laws to better respond to natural disasters with consideration for people's pets, because people died not willing to leave their pets. So that was one of the few good outcomes from that disaster. But
I do remember that. There was a lot of people that didn't want to leave their houses because of that. One
that stuck with me, an elderly couple died, and I didn't see them. I saw their dog, and the woman was breaking down crying because they wouldn't leave their dog, and so they were on the roof. The water took them, and the dog swam, and it was just terrifying. It was awful. It was just preventable, very preventable. But back to veterans. Digress a little. Many people saw you give a very powerful speech on the Enfield Town Green in I believe it was March of this year, March 2025. And I was among the crowd. I was very impressed. And you were a featured speaker along with members of the Enfield Town Council and Enfield's the new Enfield State Representative, John Santinella. And you gave an impassioned plea to demand that our government step up and support veterans in a meaningful way, and also spoke out about the challenges facing veterans, including PTSD, traumatic brain injury, depression, suicide, homelessness, which is reprehensible that there's thousands of veterans who are homeless in this country. So what drives you to be such a strong advocate for veterans?
So when I was about to separate from the military, they had diagnosed me with clinical anxiety, depression, and PTSD. And these were kind of not just from the Army, but they were kind of accumulated over the years for me. What I remember the most about that was how greatly the amount of assistance that I received basically from the folks, the psychiatric staff at the post that I was at, as well as the follow-up that came from the Veterans Administration, the centers that I went to. Just a lot of tremendous amount of assistance. And at the time it was for, like they said, the mental health. It really helped me transition from being in the military life all the way up to, coming back to civilian life. And I think that's the biggest thing that's overlooked for a lot of people, especially veterans too. They kind of overlook that whole transition phase from military to civilian. When you're in the military, there's a lot of pressure on you mentally. I mean, if we take it in phases here, like you go into basic training, the whole purpose of basic training is to gear you up, not only physically, but mentally, to be able to withstand all the rigors of war. So they train you, and they actually will do specific mind games to you to kind of really work at you and make sure that you're not going to crack, you're not going to break. And they really try to, put the stress on you, but also make sure that you're strong enough to be able to handle the rigors. And then when you go from training to your garrison duty, it's a lot of what I like to say, hurry up and wait. There's a lot of that stuff where you at times are really stressed, and at times it's kind of like, really, why are we doing this type of thing? But there's always that little layer of stress that you feel when you're even in garrison duty, where you have to be squared away. Your uniform has to be, right. You can't have big mistakes or anything like that. You got to be on time for formations or wherever you're supposed to show up. You need to show up on time. You can't be late there. All the other tasks that you do, you got to make sure you're a squared away soldier. If you're not, you actually will get in trouble. You'll take UCMG actions, Article 15 actions. Leadership isn't afraid to do that just to make sure their soldiers are squared away. And from there, if you take it, another step further, once you start going to deployments, then now you're amping up that pressure by a factor of 10, because now you're not only having to stay squared away and make sure you've got all the answers for yourself in a foreign land or wherever you're far away from home, you're also doing it away from your family, away from your friends. So when you do all that and you've got all that mental stress, that mental pressure that's really acting on you and acts on you over a period of years for most people. And then when you leave the military, there is some transitional servicing that goes on there where they try and help you get to, hey, now you're going to be a civilian, here's what you're going to be doing. And there is a lot of assistance that, the military does for you, but I feel like the mental part of it's being overlooked. So when you think about that, all that mental stress that you receive, and now you're being pushed into the civilian life, and all the stuff that you were doing before no longer applies.
Right.
So for a lot of people, it's very difficult to make that transition, and I feel like there should be a little bit more effort there. And that's where I think, that's why I'm such a strong advocate for it. I saw how much it impacted me, being able to kind of sort my head out and sort my, the issues that I was feeling in my head here. I wanted to be able to make sure that other veterans were able to do that as well. And that's kind of why I'm such a strong advocate for not just veteran services and veteran benefits, but also the mental health aspect.
Do you feel that has gotten better or worse, addressing the mental health aspect in recent years, say?
I think it's gotten overburdened in a way. That's probably the best way to describe it. I feel like there have been some improvements, but when you think about it, we've had an entire generation of people in our country who have gone to war, basically, between the war in Iraq and Afghanistan. So that's a lot of people to put through a system that was already kind of overtaxed to begin with. So that's why I'm feeling like, as much as the Veterans Administration, and again, I love the VA. I think they do great work. I think the people who work for the VA are just saints, absolute heroes to me. But they're overworked, and they really could use a lot of help.
Yeah. Okay, so homelessness, touched on earlier. Thousands of veterans nationwide. My understanding is most are in California, but there's some probably in every state, I would imagine. But still, that's a scourge on our country that we could make that veterans are even homeless. It's a terrible thing. But why is that? They seem to be in a higher proportion of the homeless seem to be veterans than other groups, other demographics. Why would you say that is?
So the NVHS.org lists like about 5 factors that are primary, motivators or motivating factors for homelessness within veterans: substance abuse, PTSD and mental health issues, low income, and economic instability. For me, that kind of all still boils down to the same thing, which is the mental part of it. Okay, so there is that transition, and when you go into the military, whether people want to admit it or not, you are changed. There is something about you that you're not the same person going in when you leave. There's there's parts of you that you may do some silly things like when you sit down to eat at a meal, you might have one hand on your thigh because the drill sergeant told you that's how you must eat your meal, type of thing. It's little things like that veterans sometimes don't even realize they're doing, but you do get changed. And when you make that transition again, it's a severe one from being in the military going into civilian life. Things that you would do in the military you wouldn't do in civilian life. So sometimes there's that inability to cope, and when that happens, it's difficult for the veterans sometimes to be able to know what to do. Mental health is still an issue in this country that people are afraid to talk about. And I'm doing my best personally to try and promote that, to say, hey, let's talk about that, because it's not something to be ashamed of. No. So I'd like to see a little bit more done about the mental health part, because I think that ties into all of it. Veterans will sometimes, turn to drugs, turn to alcohol to kind of cope with some of the feelings they're feeling inside. Sometimes when they act out or they lash out with, their family or their loved ones, there can be a breaking point sometimes where they say, you know what, we can't do this. You have to leave. You know, and again, when you're transitioning from military to civilian life, there is some assistance, but really, if you think about it, you're going from a job that you worked at for 4, 8, 12, however many years, and now you're going to probably no job. It's very rare that somebody will go from being in the military to, as soon as they separate, to suddenly you have a job again. There's going to be a period where you're not earning that income, and yes, they can claim unemployment to some degree and stuff, but it's hard to pay the bills sometimes. So being able to get that, once you get to that point where you're trying to find that job, that's where kind of the low income hits, the economic instability, and if you compound that with any mental health pressures or stress, then that could lead you to that breaking point. And the last thing I want to mention about this too is I keep going back to the mental health part. There's a lot of veterans out there that feel like they are just they're real tough, and they are. They are very tough. But they get that to a point where they feel like they don't need help, and they were trained to do that. I mean, they were very trained in the military. Like, I can do this. I don't leave soldiers behind. I'm going to, I'm going to tough this out. I can beat this. And they try to do so much on their own, and they don't realize sometimes that they can reach out. There is help out there, and it's okay to ask for that help. Now, that's really the big part. When you're too proud to try and ask for that help, that's what kind of leads them to go, hey, I'm not going to live here. I'm going to go out to the streets because I'd rather live on the street than live with so-and-so.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. That's an interesting perspective of where they're coming from, that background, and too bad it's a different perspective almost that you have to take. Like, you can be tough by being open and communicating your struggles. Say that's another kind of toughness that. But I understand why people would be that way too and not want to. It's a stigma that should not be a stigma.
Exactly.
In this country, and what does the VA do? Like you mentioned, you spoke highly of the VA. What do they do to help veterans in terms of resources or services through the VA? And where is there a need for improvement at the VA?
So I have a list of some of the veteran services that they offer there at the Veterans Administration. So healthcare is a big one. Most veterans go there for healthcare because, again, it's free for the veterans. And that does include mental health counseling. It includes crisis management. Most veterans, or veterans who are on disability, they will always go there for their mental health capabilities and stuff. Career and employment support is also offered there. So as they transition from military to civilian life, then they offer the ability to kind of help them with their resume, help them with job offers. There are specific businesses that are more veteran friendly that they can go to, and so they'll be able to post their resumes to those places to be able to help them find a job quicker. VA does life insurance. They have access to the service member benefits. The big ones are like the GI Bill, VA home loans, disability benefits. There's pension benefits as well. There are training programs that the VA offers to help them acquire new skills or new trade if they want. Again, the housing assistance, access to your military records is a big one too. There are some times where you need to get access to what's called your DD-214, which is basically everything you've ever done in the military is in that one file, that record, that DD-214. So usually when a veteran needs to get access to that, that's where they go. They'll go right to the VA and say, I need that. Family member benefits. There's even burial and memorial planning that they can offer as well to help families out. And so on paper, it looks like there's a lot to offer.
Yeah, that's a good thing. I'm glad that's provided, at least in some part, even if there is room for improvement. It's good that they've got that structure set up. You were talking about employment support, and you spoke earlier about having certain skill sets that could translate into civilian life. I imagine that's true. That's probably very limited what you do in the military, what can actually be applied in as a gainful employment in the States in civilian life. That's probably extremely limited. The type of outside, I can see doctors and nurses that can easily translate, but many of the other skill sets are very, very niche skill sets, right? Like we're with a operation of certain.
There are some.
Yeah.
There are some skill sets that are kind of niche, like satellite repair or satellite communications or something like that. You do have to kind of find a specific, industry for that. But there are a lot of other ones that do work out well. There's like a lot of them are for like construction. There's MOSs for that. The doctors and nurses, like you mentioned, military police. It's where like the bulk of soldiers. I'm speaking from the Army, of course, here, but the bulk of soldiers that go into the MOS, which is called like 11 Bravo. It used to be called 11 Bravo. That's kind of your standard infantryman.
Okay.
And those are the ones that are trained to fight.
Yep.
So it's tough for them sometimes because they need to try and while they're in the Army, try to find those extra skills to help their career in the long run. And that's where the GI Bill is really, really helpful.
Yeah.
Because for the service that you do, the military will reimburse you for that college degree that you're going for.
Yep.
And if you serve the 4 year, it used to be 4 years, and you would get 100% reimbursement for college.
Yeah.
So getting that college degree is just a matter of you wanting to go get it.
Right.
They take care of all the financial part, which is the toughest part, right?
Yes, of course. Yeah, now, especially nowadays. Years ago it was more affordable. Now it's extremely difficult. Wow, that's nice to hear about the VA, though. That's wonderful. So do you have any comments on at the federal level with the Trump administration? You mentioned in your speech in Enfield something about the Trump administration attempting to scrub the Department of Defense website, the part that honors certain military heroes. Would you care to comment on that?
Sure. So this was something that happened a couple months back where certain areas of that Department of Defense website, there are areas in there that are honoring past heroes, such as there's Major General Charles Rogers. He was the first black Congressional Medal of Honor recipient. The Navajo code talkers from World War II were instrumental in breaking and establishing cryptology for us in World War II that helped us win the war. There was a lot of specific areas that were targeted from that site, and they were the URLs on those sites were actually changed so that you could no longer access those individuals.
Wow.
And when you went to go and try to access them or do a Google search on them, you'd find in the URL that they put the letters DEI in as part of the link.
Yeah.
And we can kind of suppose from that action that they were trying to target those sites for some reason to say this is something that is too. They're trying to do this with DEI and say we no longer want that.
Yeah.
But I think that was done in error because it's just there's no reason to target an individual who's been dead for over 20 years, who's served with honor and served with distinction. To take that away from them and their family is just disgraceful to me.
Extremely, extremely. I think that's part of the erasure of history of certain, so that the history is gone and it further compromises certain groups that are discriminated against currently. And I think, it's an abomination, frankly.
Yeah.
How about Doge, Elon Musk?
I'm glad you brought that up.
Any comments?
So one of the things that's the challenge that the Veterans Administration is facing now is that they have been ordered to cut approximately 15% of their workforce, which translates to about 70 to 80,000 jobs. And when you look at the media and find what they're saying about it, they're trying to put a nice face on it to say, oh, we're doing this for efficiency, we're improving, we're making things better for veterans. But the truth is you really need, especially when it comes to that care that a veteran might need, whether it's mental health counseling or health care or any other services that they require, you really can't beat a human being there across from you on the other side of that desk. So when they're laying off these many people, it also not only affects the veterans who are seeking the care, it actually affects veterans themselves because approximately 25% of all employees in the VA are veterans. And I believe about half of those, so about 12%, were considered as disabled veterans.
Yeah. We only have a couple minutes left. I'd like to just talk on two subjects remaining. The sad statistics of suicides amongst veterans. Only 6% of the U.S. population are classified as veterans, yet suicide deaths are, all suicide deaths are what percentage?
20% of all suicide deaths, yeah.
And they're only 6% of the U.S. population. That's very, very high. And what is the main modality of suicide amongst those?
It's from firearms.
Firearms,
yeah. About 71% are done through firearms.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are veterans more likely to have firearms?
Yeah, about twice as likely than non-veterans.
Okay.
And the biggest statistic on that is 17 veterans on average commit suicide every single day.
Oh, wow.
Which is, to me, that's the most distressing statistic of all.
Yeah.
You would think that a country that values veterans or values the people who are fighting for them would take care of them long after they've done their service.
That's right.
And that's where I think we're falling down.
That's right. And that goes back to mental health, especially the focus on making sure that they're get the resources they need.
Exactly.
As a thank you, as a big thank you from the country. You know?
Exactly. Yeah.
So in closing, we only have a couple minutes left here, 2 minutes left.
Sure.
You do a Twitch stream. I don't know what Twitch is. I'm giving my age here, but can you tell us a little bit about what Twitch is and what you do on your stream?
Sure. So Twitch is for people who like to play video games and who like to be able to stream while they're playing to an audience.
Okay.
Kind of like what we're doing here today.
Okay.
So I do a Twitch stream usually once or twice a week. And mine is geared more towards retro video games, the older ones we used to play when we were kids. And it's designed to be a safe space for everyone. Doesn't matter. We keep the politics off of it. It's designed to be for mental health and for helping people with mental health issues and being aware. On every stream, I have the suicide crisis line, the number 988 always on there, along with the ways you can reach that hotline. Because that's what I want. I want to make a safe space for everybody. Come there, relax, watch me goof off on some video games, and just have a good time.
Yeah. That's wonderful.
So.
Well, Scott, thank you. It's been wonderful chatting with you here today. Thanks for all you do and for the inspiration you provide to so many people, veterans and non-veterans alike. And please just keep up what you're doing because I think you're making a big impact on many people's lives. And thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Okay.